Have you ever felt like you're chasing after things that drain your wallet but offer no real value in return? Those items, services, or habits that you think will bring comfort, but in reality, they pull you further away from your financial goals and true freedom. Imagine if you could spot the 9 things quietly siphoning money from your pocket without giving you any benefits at all. Would you stop and make a change? The secret lies in your hands, and by simply shifting your perspective, you can turn them into the motivation needed to achieve bigger goals. Keep watching this video to uncover the 9 things that are a complete waste of money that you may never have even considered. 1. Expensive designer clothes. When I first started paying attention to my personal finances, the first thing I had to face wasn't my investments, but my own wardrobe. I used to think that dressing well would help me enter bigger rooms, earn more respect, be seen as successful. And I spent a lot, from leather jackets to limited edition sneakers, just to feel like I belonged. But here's the problem. While I might have looked like a successful entrepreneur, there was barely a few $100 left in my wallet. I had days where I'd step out of the house confidently in a shiny suit that cost nearly a month's salary, only to come home and frantically scroll through my phone, not knowing how I'd pay the utility bills coming up. I used to live by the mantra: dress for the job you want, not the job you have. But it turns out, if you're just dressing the part without investing in skills, assets, or real opportunities, then that suit is just a mask. I know some people might argue, but dressing well is for confidence. I agree. Who doesn't want to look sharp? But let's be clear, dressing neat and appropriate is one thing. Spending money on expensive designer items just to impress is something entirely different. If your goal is to build a solid financial future, then a habit of spending to look successful will only pull you backwards. You may look good today, but be hungry tomorrow. Does that seem worth it? I recall the story of Kevin O'Leary, the famous investor on Shark Tank. He once said that he only wore one style of suit, one type of shoes, day in and day out, not because he couldn't afford it, but because he didn't want to waste energy on trivial choices that didn't bring real value. Instead of buying more clothes, he bought stocks. Instead of buying a Rolex watch, he bought time by hiring help and focusing on what truly mattered. That completely shifted my perspective. I started selling the clothes I never wore, stopped collecting shoes, and began putting that money into a small investment fund. At first, it was only a few $dozen each week, but I've never regretted it. You know what? When you have assets, you don't need a dress to prove anything. Money in the bank is what truly lets you sleep well, not the trendy jacket you wear a few times a year. And if you're still unsure, ask yourself, does this item bring me closer to financial freedom, or is it pulling me further away? The answer is often crystal clear. 2. Technology devices. After gradually letting go of my habit of spending money on designer clothes, I thought I had overcome my consumerism addiction. But it turns out it just shifted forms. Instead of hunting for discounts at fashion stores, I started lining up for the new iPhone release. Do you know that feeling? When a phone you're using is still working perfectly, still taking clear photos, still handling tasks just fine. But then an advertisement pops up. The camera has been upgraded, the screen is brighter, the edges are thinner, and suddenly you begin to feel that your device is outdated. I fell into this trap year after year. Every time Apple released a new product, I found myself wanting to keep up with the trends, even though, in reality, I wasn't a photographer, nor was I a gamer needing fast processing speeds. I used my device for email, browsing, and a few basic apps. But still, I'd spend over $1,000 on a new phone simply because it was new. The issue wasn't just with the phone. I'd upgraded my tablet, my laptop, even my headphones. All of my old devices were still in good condition. And then I realized I was investing in things I didn't truly need, while my savings account remained thin. Tech upgrades are often disguised under terms like performance and better experience. But the truth is, most of these upgrades are so minor that if you don't check the specs carefully, you won't even notice them. What truly makes you crave the new device is marketing strategies making you believe you're falling behind if you don't own the latest model. I remember hearing Elon Musk say that he never buys new devices just because they're new. Despite being the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, he still uses simple tools and focuses on creativity, not the equipment. Because in the end, the device is just a tool. It's the user who determines the outcome. Once I understood that, I changed. I kept my old phone for another 2 years, used my 5-year-old laptop to edit videos, write articles, and even record podcasts. And you know what? No one complained about the quality of my work. On the contrary, I saved quite a bit of money, which I could invest in an advanced course or even in a small automated investment account. We're living in an era where everything is constantly being upgraded, but not everything new is better. And following trends doesn't automatically lead to success. Sometimes, knowing when to stop and being satisfied with what you have is the key to moving faster and further. So, before you click order on that new tech item, ask yourself, has my current device really stopped meeting my needs? Or am I just being enticed by a cleverly crafted advertisement? When you buy because you need something, you're in control of your life. When you buy just because it's newly released, you're letting others control you. 3. Credit cards. I used to think that after learning to resist the temptation of the latest tech gadgets, I had become smarter with my money. But then, I started taking a closer look at my monthly statements, and the reality shocked me. That small credit card, the one tucked neatly in my wallet, turned out to be the thing draining more money from me than any big shopping spree ever did. Not because I was overspending, but because I was paying late. At first, I only intended to pay a part, leaving the rest to take care of next month. It seemed light and reasonable. But that delay, that was what fed the monster called compound interest. Credit cards can charge interest rates as high as 20% to 25% per year. And even worse, the interest is compounded on the interest. I still remember the first time I realized I was paying nearly $80 in interest on a $500 expense just because I had delayed a few payments. If I had invested that money, saved it, or simply used it to pay down my student loan, my financial picture would look a lot different. What confused me even more was that I had consoled myself by thinking, at least I'm earning rewards points. But then I discovered that those points weren't even enough for a cheap flight ticket, not to mention the countless conditions attached. Meanwhile, the interest I was paying could have easily covered several round-trip economy tickets. I remember hearing Warren Buffett say, if you're borrowing money at 18% interest to buy things you don't need, you're not a victim, you're an accomplice to poverty. That hit me hard, because I realized I had been that person, and I wasn't alone. According to Bankrate, over 45% of Americans carry credit card debt every month. They don't realize that just by carrying a balance for a few months, the amount they pay can double the cost of what they bought. It's like a pit. The more you try to climb out, the more you're pulled back down by the rope of compound interest. I used to think this was something only young people fell into, but no. I know a colleague, over 50, with a good income, but always stressed when a credit card bill was due. He once shared, I used it to collect miles for my dream trip, but before I could go, I was drowning in debt. It broke my heart. After months of battling myself, I decided to change. I set a golden rule. I wouldn't charge anything to my credit card unless I could pay it off in full by the next cycle. And if my finances were tight, I'd stop using the card instead of stretching the debt, just to maintain an imaginary credit score. I started tracking my daily expenses, used debit cards more, and learned to delay purchasing things I didn't truly need. That small change made a big difference. A few months later, I no longer received overdue payment reminders from a bank, and I no longer felt anxious when looking at my monthly statements. I realized financial discipline doesn't come from earning more money, but from respecting every dollar you spend. If I can't control a small credit card, how can I control a business or a big dream? Steve Jobs once said, focusing is not about saying yes to the important things. It's about saying no to the hundreds of other things. In my case, saying no to the habit of spending on credit is how I said yes to financial freedom later on. 4. Useless subscriptions. After breaking free from the credit card debt cycle, I felt I was gaining better control over my finances. But then, one early morning, while reviewing my bank statements, I discovered something unbelievable. There were 5 recurring charges I didn't even remember subscribing to. One was for an online language learning account, something I'd eagerly signed up for, but had only used for a few weeks before abandoning. Another was a meditation app, a movie streaming service, and even a gym membership I hadn't set foot in for 6 months. Each one cost only $4, $10, or $14, small enough that I didn't notice. But combined, I was losing nearly $70 a month, about the same as my household's utility bills. And the truth is, I wasn't alone. According to a CNBC study, the average American has between 6 to 10 recurring subscriptions, and more than 70% can't even remember everything they're paying for. This doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of just trying for a month, I'll use it when I have time, and then forgetting. I realized I was caught in a form of leakage, spending not enough to grab attention, but consistent enough to harm my finances in the long run. Like a bucket with a hole in the bottom, no matter how much water you pour in, it's useless unless you plug those leaks. I used to tell myself, it's just a few bucks a month, not a big deal. But if you multiply that by 12 months, plus the compound interest, if I'd invested that money, I had lost quite a chunk. What was worse, I had lost the sense of control over my own wallet. This reminded me of David Bach, author of The Automatic Millionaire. He once spoke about the concept of the latte factor, those small, unnecessary expenses, like a daily latte, an unused app, or a subscription you only use a few times a month. Over time, those little things are what prevent you from accumulating anything. I began doing something simple I had never taken seriously before, making a list of all my subscriptions. I dug through my emails, checked my bank app, and scrolled through both the App Store and Google Play to see where my money was going. The result? I canceled over 7 subscriptions and kept only the 2 I used weekly. Soon after, I started saving a little each month, and the wonderful thing was I didn't feel deprived at all. In fact, I felt lighter, knowing I wasn't carrying the burden of paying for something I wasn't even using. I learned something. Saving isn't always about sacrifice. Sometimes it's just about making more mindful decisions. And with every subscription I cut, I was buying back my freedom, my control, and my self-respect as a responsible adult who knew exactly what I was doing with my money. I think of those successful people I've admired, like Mark Cuban, the American billionaire, who once said, "Saving isn't an act of the poor, it's a habit of those who understand the value of time and money." And indeed, I don't need to be rich to live mindfully, but I do need to live mindfully if I want to be rich. 5. Lottery ticket. After cutting unnecessary subscriptions, I started saving a little money each month. And surprisingly, it was at that moment that I realized an old habit was quietly draining my hope and my wallet, buying lottery tickets. At first, it was just a few dollars a week, not much to worry about. But it quickly became a harmless routine, as if I were investing in hope. I told myself, maybe, just maybe, one day I'll hit it big. And that seemingly rational excuse made me pull out my wallet without hesitation every time I passed by a convenience store. But one day, as I looked at my annual spending sheet, I was shocked. Just $10 a week meant I was spending over $500 a year on flimsy slips of paper that promised nothing except distant dreams. If I multiplied that by 10 years or even a lifetime, that amount was enough to learn a new skill, invest in a retirement fund, or open a self-managed investment account. The truth is, the odds of winning the Powerball lottery are 1 in 292 million. You are more likely to be struck by lightning twice in your life than to win the jackpot. But why do so many still play? I looked into it and found that the people who buy the most lottery tickets are often the ones with the lowest incomes. Some call it tax on the poor, not because they're not intelligent, but because they are tired. They long for something big enough to escape their current lives. The lottery offers them a sliver of hope, however fragile, but misplaced hope becomes illusion. I remembered Warren Buffett, one of the greatest investors in the world, who once said, "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing with your money." I didn't know. I wasn't investing in skills. I wasn't saving. I wasn't improving. I was betting my future on random numbers on a ticket. I began to change. Every time I felt the urge to buy a lottery ticket, I asked myself, what if I used that money to buy a book, take an online course, or contribute to an investment fund? Will my future look different? And the answer was always yes. Instead of dreaming of a big win, I started dreaming of a better version of myself, someone who could earn money based on skill, not luck. I wrote down what I wanted to do. Learn more about personal finance, improve my writing skills, start a small channel to share my journey. Every week, $10 became an investment in my future, not in dreams, but in action. I thought about Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. He grew up in a poor neighborhood with no privileges. But instead of buying lottery tickets, he bet on his dream and hard work. The result was a global coffee empire built not on luck, but on strategy, ambition, and perseverance. And so I, too, don't need to become a billionaire. I just need to stop living off fragile hope and start living through clear, purposeful actions. 6. Order food without planning. After giving up the habit of buying lottery tickets, I started feeling more in control of my personal finances. But one evening, I didn't feel like cooking. Tired after a long day, I opened the app, swiped a few times, and within 30 minutes, a sandwich was delivered to my door. Original price, $12. But after taxes, delivery fees, platform charges, and tips, I paid nearly $30 for a sandwich that, honestly, I could have made at home in 10 minutes with $4 worth of ingredients. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But then, it wasn't just a one-time thing. Every time I was tired, I thought I deserve a break. What's the harm? So, a few times a week, I repeated the same pattern. Before I knew it, I realized I was spending hundreds of dollars a month just to pay for my own laziness. I'm not saying ordering takeout is wrong. On busy days, it makes perfect sense. But when I had the time and energy to either go out to buy food or cook it myself, what I was doing in reality was paying for excessive convenience without even realizing it. I remember reading a quote by Dave Ramsey, a famous American financial expert. You don't have to live like a poor person to be wealthy, but you need to stop spending money like a fake rich person. And I realized my habit of frequently ordering food was a classic example of fake wealth. I started challenging myself. Only order takeout once a week at most. The rest of the time, I cooked or at least walked to the store to buy food. The feeling of saving money and getting a bit of exercise made me feel recharged after each meal, rather than just full in the stomach and empty in my wallet. You know, Elon Musk once lived on just $1 a day for a month to test whether he could live as simply as possible and still survive. For him, it was a way to train his willpower to test his limits before building SpaceX and Tesla. Of course, you and I don't need to be that extreme, but cutting back on a few takeout orders, cooking for ourselves, or walking to the supermarket is a form of training for discipline and proactive thinking. I'm not against convenience, but if we become too reliant on it, we lose something far more valuable, our ability to take care of ourselves. And more importantly, I learned that every time I choose to cook instead of ordering out, it's not just about saving money, it's about conquering myself. 7. Types of exercise equipment. When I started focusing on my health, I thought I needed to invest seriously. So, I bought a treadmill for nearly $2,000. It arrived, got installed, and for the first week, I ran vigorously. It felt like I was embarking on a transformation journey, as if just having that machine would make me thinner, healthier, and more disciplined. But then, reality didn't match the ads. By the second week, I started getting lazy. By the third week, I told myself, I'll skip today, I'll make up for it tomorrow. And by the fourth week, the treadmill officially became the most expensive clothes rack in my house. I thought I was the only one like that, until I read a statistic from Forbes Health. Over 40% of Americans who buy home fitness equipment never use it after the first 3 months. Many of us, perhaps you, too, aren't lacking in equipment. Smart yoga mats, health tracking wristbands, and even high-tech wall-mounted devices like Tonal or Peloton are worth thousands of dollars. But the one thing missing is perseverance in action. I started asking myself, does health really require expensive technology? And then I realized no. I've seen elderly people in the park every morning, walking slowly but staying fit for years. I've read about Jack LaLanne, an American fitness legend, who exercised every day until he was 90 without any fancy gym equipment. He just used his own body, push-ups, squats, deep breaths, simple and scientific eating habits. I used to buy equipment to feel like I was changing. But it wasn't until I set the equipment aside and started moving every day that I saw real changes in my body and mind. I started with the smallest things of a 15-minute walk around the block every morning, 10 push-ups whenever I felt lazy, drinking more water, eating more vegetables regularly. And from there, I realized the only thing you need to get healthier is not expensive equipment, but a strong decision to take action. You don't need a heart rate monitoring app to know when you're slacking. You just need to be honest with yourself. You don't need a $3,000 wall-mounted device. You just need to get up and start from the floor of your own home. Action always beats technology. 8. Expensive courses. Have you ever felt trapped by the promises of too good to be true online courses or expensive seminars? I certainly have. The ads were enticing. The promises of getting rich quickly, changing your life in a matter of weeks, and even becoming the best version of yourself were everywhere. Once, I enrolled in an online course worth over $2,000, convinced that this would be the opportunity to change everything. They promised to teach me how to build a successful business, double my income in the first year, and become an expert in a field I loved. In my mind, I pictured these grand scenes, working from anywhere, achieving financial freedom, and living the dream life. But reality was far different. The brilliant marketing had made me forget that true value doesn't come from paying for an expensive course that you never apply in real life. These courses mostly got me excited, but didn't provide me with a clear strategy or actionable steps to make a real change. A recent study from the Harvard Business Review showed that more than 80% of people who take personal development courses never apply the knowledge to their work or life. They simply listen and learn, but never take action. I remember a quote from Warren Buffett, a man who not only succeeded in business, but also became known for his caution in selecting information and learning. Learn from successful people, but don't just listen to what they say. What matters more is applying what you learn in real life. As I began to reflect, I realized that instead of just enrolling in expensive courses, I could have taught myself using free resources or reasonably priced options that still provided the knowledge I needed to progress. For example, websites like Coursera, Udemy, or YouTube, where thousands of free or affordable courses are available, could offer the practical knowledge I needed without the hefty price tag. I started focusing on practice instead of simply consuming information. I learned from entrepreneurs like Tim Ferriss, author of The 4-Hour Workweek, who shared valuable lessons on optimizing time and working efficiently. But the key was not just listening, but acting. Not all expensive courses or seminars provide true value. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars just to get inspired. The important thing is to find quality resources at a reasonable price. And, more importantly, apply what you've learned to life and work. Learn selectively and practice every day. That is the real key to lasting change. Remember, self-improvement is important, but you don't have to pay an unreasonable price for empty promises. 9. Expensive items and services. Perhaps you've been in the same situation I was, feeling the need to own expensive things, dine at fancy restaurants, or even travel to luxurious destinations just to impress others. I remember once spending a large sum of money to buy a luxury watch, thinking it would make me stand out in my friends' eyes. But looking back, I realized I had wasted money on something that didn't bring lasting value. While you may think these items will make others admire you, the truth is they don't care about them as much as you think. I tried it, and I found that people may admire you in that moment, but they'll quickly forget. I was once one of those people who focused solely on showing off to feel more valuable. But gradually, I realized that true value doesn't come from what you own or what you can flaunt. The question I began to ask myself was, does this item, this trip, or this expensive meal bring me closer to my goal of financial freedom? When I asked myself this question, everything became clearer. Shopping didn't make me happy long-term. Dining in fancy restaurants just wastes money without providing any real value. Traveling to check in at famous spots didn't help me grow as a person or improve my finances. A prime example is Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX. Even though he has the financial ability to live a lavish life, he chooses to live simply. Musk doesn't live in luxurious mansions, and he's even driven his own Tesla Model S to the office. What matters is not what you have, but what you create, the real values you bring to the world. In truth, You don't need to buy expensive things or flaunt yourself through luxurious trips to feel confident. True confidence comes from within, from what you do, what you create, and what you contribute to society. What you own doesn't make you special. Those are just display items that society may applaud for a moment. But your true confidence and value must come from your abilities, efforts, and self-respect. Remember, financial freedom doesn't come from buying expensive things, but from investing in yourself and building lasting value. Those were 9 things that may seem normal, but are silently draining your wallet every single day. Now is the time to reflect, cut out the pointless spending, and start directing your money toward what truly matters. How many of these 9 have you fallen into? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone looking to take better control of their finances. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.